US dollar is the global reserve currency. It is the most widely used currency for international transactions. It's used by almost every country in the world to pay for oil purchases, which is where the term petrodollar comes from. While the US dollar was once backed by gold, the US dollar now is not backed by anything except the "trust us, bro" from the US government. The US dollar has an infinite supply, and that supply can be increased at any given time with pandemic-related printing as an example, seeing a whopping 40% of all USD in circulation printed just over the last couple of years. No wonder the dollar has lost 92% of its purchasing power in the last century.
This is a stack of $1 million $1 bills. It's about 50 feet higher than the Statue of Liberty. $1 billion would be a lot higher, reaching 67 miles. This would just surpass the edge of the atmosphere, technically reaching space. Now, you might think Elon Musk's net worth of over $200 billion would reach the moon, but it doesn't even make it 7% of the way there. Even Apple's company valuation of nearly $3 trillion only makes it about 85% of the way to the moon. But if you take the current US national debt of $33 trillion, you could make it all the way to the moon and back 4.5 times.
And China just did the unthinkable, and the West is in big trouble. The alliance between Russia and China is awesome. I mean awesome in a dramatic shift of the entire world economic order kind of way. What happened this week is absolutely groundbreaking and was probably the biggest story of the last 30 years, but it hardly got any news coverage at all. Seriously, one of the most important stories of our lifetime happened this week, and almost no one covered it. Russia joined forces with China to create their own new reserve currency. Officially. Yes, it's happening, guys. This means that the new reserve currency won't be the US dollar. This new currency will be based on rare earth minerals, guys. I've been saying this for a while, and that's why I'm personally investing in them, okay? Russia and China are moving their currency to gold, silver, uranium, nickel, copper, real, tangible things, guys. This means that Russia and China are tying their country's fortunes to minerals that they bring out of the ground and then sell to the rest of the world. Just look at how Russia started stockpiling gold over the last 20 years, while the United States went further and further into debt and printing money. Just look at this chart. This is gold. Astonishing. And this was all happening right out there in the open. Here is a headline 2 years before the war with Ukraine broke out. China and Russia ditched dollar and moved toward financial alliance. Yeah, and everyone else was ignoring it. We've had some recent dollar strengthening a little bit, but that's peanuts compared to what's actually happening, because these BRICS nations have been in the midst of a 20-year plan to de-dollarize. De-dollarize. Even before the Ukraine conflict started, both China and Russia were stockpiling gold and working on denominating transactions outside of the United States dollar. It was another secret that was all right there out in the open for anyone to pay attention to. This is a massive challenge to the US dollar, which isn't based on gold or anything. It's actually based on debt. Yes, the US dollar is a debt-based currency, and the United States is $30 trillion in debt. China and Russia are sitting on mountains of minerals that the United States and Europe are clamoring for. Frankly, they're begging for them.
Supposed to do when a large part of your wealth and investments are tied up in a failing currency. It's not about the number in your accounts. It's about what you can buy with that number. Mexico, one of our largest trade partners to the south, just started the depegging and decoupling process from the US dollar. While Saudi Arabia recently has also been talking about accepting other currencies for oil. These are major indications of our monetary system unraveling. What if you are being set up to keep your money inside the banks and the markets while the financial institutions are transferring their own money into gold?
By the U.S. government. What's baffling to me is how there is resilient bipartisan support for maintaining this relationship with one of the creepiest, most repressive nations on earth when we're energy independent. Why are we doing this?
Well, because they trade in the U.S., they trade oil in the U.S. dollar. I mean, if you really want to have a little truth talk about Saudi Arabia,
yes,
it's that we need them selling oil in the U.S. dollar in order to maintain the dominance of the dollar and to be able to make our sanctions effective elsewhere in the world, especially among oil-producing nations.
Foreign governments buying more gold than treasuries. You have China and Japan, the two largest holders of treasuries. They stopped their rate of buying, and they've essentially been dishoarding. They've been like reducing their total stock of treasuries in favor of other things. You have countries starting to talk about pricing energy in other currencies, whether it be the Saudis selling to China, that's their largest client. They sell 25% of their oil to China. Why would they use dollars? They're going to start selling that in RMB. You've got Israel, an ally of the US, selling off dollar reserves to buy Chinese reserves. So this whole petrodollar euro system is coming under pressure. And, to me, the thesis of my book in many ways is number one, just charting the rise of global Bitcoin adoption as told through stories of people, but also charting this history of money where we went from like essentially the reserve currency of the world being gold to being US treasuries, essentially. And then I think it's going to be Bitcoin. It's going to be next. So that's my thesis.
The only reason America could play these games is because it has something called the petrodollar system, where it creates money out of thin air with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve loans that money to the government on interest I don't understand. It makes no sense.
Makes no sense.
They put that money in the streets. Now, here's Saudi Arabia's role. Saudi Arabia prices all its oil in dollars. So if you want to buy that f***ing oil, it doesn't want your yen. It doesn't want your rupees. All that shit. It wants dollars. So now you have to go out there and get those dollars. And how do you get those dollars? Create shit in your country and you send it to Uncle Sam. And he pays you in dollars, and now you have the dollars you need to buy the oil to get your economy going. And then Saudis take that f***ing money and they buy f***ing T-bonds, T-bills with it. It's like recycling.
It's a snake, Ouroboros.
That system is protected by the United States military.
That's what the money's back.
Exactly. It makes no sense. It's money out of thin air.
Our dollar has value on the global stage because it's the default currency of our world. The petrodollar. The petrodollar is like this big game where countries buy and sell oil using US dollars. This game helps the United States keep its money strong and make sure other countries want to buy and use its money. But let's say other countries don't want to play the game anymore. That could definitely cause problems for the United States, because then we don't have a global hegemony and can't use the dollar as a political tool. And that's where we are right now amid the Russia-Ukraine war and this whole geopolitical disaster.
Putin announced this week that Russia will begin using the Chinese yuan for international payments instead of the dollar. Saudi Arabia is also in talks with Beijing to do the same thing.
For Saudi Arabia, who has indicated that they're open to this, to say, you know what, we're going to be open to considering other currencies to trade in oil. If that were to happen, there would be a complete implosion of the global economic system, but certainly the American economic system. And if that were to happen, you'd be looking at sky-high inflation, just raging Weimar Republic kind of inflation.
We have arrived at the inevitability of the dethroning of the dollar. On the political stage, we're so seemingly at odds with China and Russia. That whole thing has set the stage for China and Russia to propose a solution for ending dollar dominance, which has been coined, no pun intended, as de-dollarization. Russia is now utilizing its own currency, the ruble, and China's yuan as the petro yuan in purchasing of oil and trade with other countries. Here's the kicker. Brazil, Latin America's largest economy, signed on for this deal back in February in agreement with China, where they said, okay, instead of using the dollar, the petrodollar, we're going to use the petro yuan to trade with you. Turkey, Pakistan, India, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and more have signed on to de-dollarize their economy. And the biggest story today, April 3rd, is that Japan is now buying Russian oil, meaning it's de-dollarizing too. Just think about it for a minute. Our dollar is backed in nothing except the confidence to exchange it for goods and services. The parasitic force on our country made sure back when the Federal Reserve was created, and then again in 1971, I think, that our currency wasn't going to be backed by anything tangible like gold or silver. So if the United States loses its grasp on the dollar, it loses its hold as a world power. And the World Economic Forum already told us in its 8 creepy predictions for 2030 that the United States would no longer be a leading world power.
I'm giving you free advice that those of you who are holding dollars, you surely might go into losses. You better do what you must do because this market is going to be different in a couple of weeks.
Talking about this for a long time, but if you're not aware yet, you need to be. This is a big, big deal. Saudi Arabia enters a trade alliance with China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and 4 Central Asian nations. Now, this came after the first yuan-settled energy trade, which will further lessen the dominance of the dollar. China has completed LNG gas trade with Chinese yuan, ending U.S. dollar reliance for energy trades. Now, this has been called a landmark development as China and France have completed an LNG gas trade using the Chinese yuan, thus ending the reliance on the U.S. dollar for energy trades. Some big hands are making some major moves and the dominoes are falling. I hope you're prepared.
So you're never going to believe what happened today. Saudi Arabia just cut ties with the U.S. dollar. This is the first time in 100 years that the dollar has had a real challenge. Just so we're clear, Saudi Arabia is one of the richest countries in the world with oil. And the dollar has been backed by oil. It's been called the petrodollar. See, the dollar used to be backed by gold. For every dollar, there was a piece of gold back in every dollar. But in 1972, 3, around there, President Nixon took us off the gold standard. So ever since then, it's been backed by nothing but oil.
Non-petrodollars, such as gold or a basket of currencies, or if China and Russia start trading in yuan and ruble rather than US dollars, that demand isn't there. And the way of life for the average American will be done. It will be worse than the Great Depression.
To date, anyone who's potentially threatened the status of the petrodollar hasn't fared well. Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi publicly pushed for a Pan-African gold-backed currency that he would trade for Libya's oil. He was killed during a US-backed revolution in 2011. And just a few short years before, Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein advocated selling oil for euros.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq.
The US invaded under the guise of looking for
After Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, his globalist sidekick, Henry Kissinger, went to the Saudi royal family and cooked up a deal that essentially came down to this. You sell your oil using our paper rectangles. You can only buy oil with our dollars, and we will be your personal army. By forcing the rest of the world to pay for oil using US dollars, our paper rectangles would still have demand in the rest of the world, and in return, we send troops to go and die in the Middle East.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait.
Over and over and over again.
I ordered our forces to launch a cruise missile attack on the Iraqi Intelligence Service's principal command and control facility in Baghdad.
Anytime those oil interests or the interests of bank.
Well, first of all, they're very brave to do this because countries that have tried to exit the oil-dollar matrix have met terrible ends. Of course, Saddam Hussein wanted to trade oil in euros, so he was killed. You had Muammar Gaddafi wanted to trade his energy in something other than U.S. dollars. He was killed. So the track record here is pretty dire. So kudos to China for taking this project on. You've got China and Russia and the Saudis are looking to escape the U.S. dollar hegemony. They're looking to de-dollarize. That's a concept we see all over the world right now as countries want to escape from the U.S. military-industrial complex. These countries around the world are tired of funding America's military adventurism by being a party to the empire of debt as it's known around the world, the U.S. dollar, and they want to split off. They want their autonomy.